What's up, guys? Frosty here today for another Frosty Features. This is the first Frosty Features market on the Frosty Features lore. This is the first one that I am live streaming, not only to Twitch, but also to YouTube. So that's very exciting. And from what I understand, there's like one person checking it out, but that's how you know you're famous. So anyway, what this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am the person that's going to walk you through it. Hercules is our final member of the Uncanny Avengers here in Marvel Strike Force that we're going to go over. So with that, let's begin. According to Scopely, what this is the blog post description that is given by Scopely to describe the lore of the incoming characters that they are bringing in to Marvel Strike Force. What we will do is I will read this out loud and then we will rate this description at the end of the feature. Hercules, the demigod son of Zeus, Hercules was born with unmatched strength and a thirst for adventure, making him one of the most celebrated heroes of ancient Greece. After completing his famous 12 labors, he sought new challenges and eventually found his way into the modern world. He uses godly strength, endurance, and combat skills to fight alongside Earth's mightiest heroes. Though brash and sometimes reckless, Hercules is a loyal ally and a powerful force for good, defending both mortals and gods from threats that span across time and space. So, that is the blog post description. We will rate that at the end of the feature. This is Hercules. Name, Hercules Panhellenius. Zeus has a last name in Marvel lore, and it's Panhellenius. Ultimately, it means over the earth, essentially, like Helios, Panhelios, Panhellenios. I rehearsed this. First appearance, Young Allies, number 16, 1945. A lot of Marvel Comics in the 1940s was, or what was Marvel Comics at the time, was retelling of various mythological stories, be them Greek or Norse. I don't think they had Egyptian, but let me know in the comments down below. They might have. But very notably, Norse mythology and Greek mythology was a big popular thing, and then they brought characters out of that. So this is very, this is how we get our introduction of characters like Thor or Hercules, what have you. Powers and abilities. Olympian physiology. So, this just means godly. So very much like, as Thor is an Asgardian god, Hercules is, he's half Olympian, half human, but that human is also part Olympian, and then also is granted a physiological boon by Hela as a baby. So, Olympian physiology, this means he's godly in all sorts of ways, and essentially this gives him nigh invulnerability, right? You gotta be really freaking tough to hurt Hercules, right? Godlike strength. So, Hercules has immeasurable strength to a point where he is strong enough that a punch from him, a very serious, like, let it go, like, just freaking go for it punch, he can shake the universe. Right? So very, very incredibly strong. Really, the only character I'm aware of off the top of my head that scales without extra magical help or whatever would be somebody like the Hulk, right? And even Hercules can outstrength the Hulk. The Hulk has to get so mad, right? Immortality, he has legitimate immortality given to all the gods of Olympus, and specified omniscience. So I went back and forth on whether or not to clarify this. Ultimately, all of the Greek gods, if you pray to them, they can hear it. So anybody praying to Hercules at any given time, he can actually pick that up and hear that prayer. So I wasn't exactly sure how to define that, so I'm calling it specified omniscience, right? Anyone that references Hercules, he can listen in on, all at the same time, so it's sort of like omniscience. So it's all knowing if his name is mentioned. There's my argument. Roast me. Aliases, many. Oh my god. Right? I list these out, or some notable ones. Ultimately, Hercules is known as a lot of things. He's been around a long time. He's been in a bunch of different configurations. He has lost his power. He's gained his powers. He's gained extra powers. Impersonated other people's powers. So he ultimately, from just being Hercules to Strongman to, well, not Strongman, But ultimately, just having this big, vast array of names that he could be known by, it was really hard for me to pick it out. But most notably, it ends up being Herc or Hercules that he's referred to. So maybe I was being lazy here. I don't know. Affiliations, most notably the Avengers. For the most part, we really only see him operating as an Olympian, as a solo artist, or within the Avengers. But he does get cast out of the Avengers. He does join the Guardians of the Galaxy, gets cast out. Most of the things he goes into, he gets cast out. You will find as we move forward that he parallels a specific Marvel character very heavily, and this includes his actual factual mental trials, almost exactly the same as others. Background, a demigod Olympian, once again granted the role of god status by Zeus himself, right? So he is the son of Zeus, and as he goes and proves himself, what have you, he does get granted his god status, and it also gets taken away, like another Marvel character you might be able to think of, and then he gets it back and forth, etc. Who died? Can't be a superhero, supervillain without somebody dying. And in the case of Hercules, I was going to make the argument of the two serpents, and we'll talk about them in a bit, but they do die for Hercules to become a thing. But the true go off and be a warrior Hercules death was Amphitryon, who is Hercules' stepfather. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail here in a bit, but most notably, that is how Hercules becomes the hero Hercules. Continuity craziness. So we before the feature started in chat, we were talking about this a little bit. So mythology in like real world mythology put into Marvel Comics is very convoluted, and it gets retconned a lot and gets changed a lot. So especially with the Greek, you would think with Hercules, because most of what we have, especially in modern references, it's Hercules retelling, but he never bothers to actually give particular, like, specific orders of something that happened or whatever. So multiple things might have happened at the same time, or be presented in a way that's impossible. Like there's a few actions that are supposedly taking course over a year, but in canon they take place in the same year, so it's impossible. So it gets a little nuts. Also, depending on where you read Hercules, he's very different. Over the course of the life of Hercules, he mirrors Thor really, really, really well. They battle with alcoholism. They have multiple sexual partners. They gain their powers, lose their powers. They become alcoholics again after, people die and things like that, and they go to these really dark places and have to regain their powers or become worthy again, what have you. And they also go head to head and fight each other a lot. So Thor's true rival, honestly, in the Marvel universe really is Hercules. They kind of have the same basis. They go toe to toe. One of the biggest divergence between the two characters of late is that Hercules is kind of revealed as a homosexual, and I think it makes it a little bit more interesting because they parallel so much, and they do a lot of adventures together, and then something goes wrong or somebody gets brainwashed and then they fight each other. They essentially are equals in every single way, and one of the big things that both of them are sort of womanizers. Hercules is definitely worse throughout most of the history, and then when we have this sort of diverging off, we find Hercules kind of reading into why he's unfaithful to all of his wives. I think he has 4 of them. He's unfaithful constantly through the whole thing, to the point where people are trying to kill him, or not trying to kill him. I don't remember. Do I talk about this? I don't talk about this. And the notable events, so I'll say it now. But there's a situation where he kills a chimera and with an arrow with Hydra venom, and the chimera's like, "Hey, listen." And he's talking to one of Hercules' wives, and he's like, "Hey, check this out. He's gonna become unfaithful. You're newly married. You wouldn't know this. He's gonna become unfaithful. So here's this blood-soaked piece of linen, and in some continuity, it's an amulet. But here's this thing, and when he's unfaithful to you, put this on him, and he will become faithful again." And what it does is it pretty much kills him. It more or less sends him to Hades and strips him of his powers, and he gets set on fire. So, and that's because of his unfaithfulness. And Zeus also, after he loses his powers, Zeus like brings it back because he's like, I'm also unfaithful too in every version of continuity, so it's fine. But all of that kind of comes to a head when he kind of realizes that he's homosexual, and it's a really interesting story. So I definitely I definitely recommend reading some of this transition. I'm not talking about it today necessarily because I really wanted to talk about something else, but very interesting, very cool thing. It's like a third notable event. You got one for free. Relationships, much like the aliases, my God, the entire Olympic situation is insane, and because essentially like so Zeus and Alcmea are his parents, Alcmea being a human princess of Mycenae, and but she's also the great granddaughter of Zeus, so also his mother is technically his aunt, if I remember that correctly, because of the daughter. Anyway, his mother is another relative of his, as with the entirety of Marvel lore, or excuse me, the Grecian mythology, whatever. So ultimately, he has an extreme, and once again, 4 wives, at least, barring any modern things as well. So in relationships, you can have a whole bunch. So I really just stuck with the ones I'm going to talk about today. So we have Zeus and Alcmea as parents, Amphitryon, who I brought up earlier, that was who dies, and Hera are his step-parents. So Zeus and Hera are a couple, and Amphitryon and Alcmea are a couple, right? So that's important to note. So these usually, actually in all of the Frost features that I bring up parents, they're all together in a line, not this time, right? Because Grecian mythology is nuts. And then many others, many children, almost all of his siblings are dead one way or the other. And then he's got uncle brothers and son fathers and all sorts of stuff. So, Hercules has a lot, and that's just how it comes with, especially when you dive into mythology that is as promiscuous as Greek mythology. So there's that. Notable events. So, notable events, we're going to start off with the origin of Hercules. So, what happens is Zeus becomes obsessed with the idea of bearing a champion child. He has plenty of gods that are his kids, but wanted the strongest warrior he could produce. So his move is to procreate, and instead of trying to create that child with Hera, his wife, he decides to look out, as I said, promiscuous. He decides to look elsewhere, and he finds his great granddaughter, Alcmea, princess of Mycenae, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna turn into the form of Amphitryon, and I'm gonna lay with his wife. And so, but Amphitron's actually off. He's a general, and he's off at war. And so he comes home to a pregnant wife who thought she had done it with her husband, and he kind of just is just okay with this for a while. But then Hera finds this out by means of Athena. So Athena is like, yo, goes to Alcmena, and Amphitron is like, yo, by the way. So Athena is like, hey, by the way, his father is Zeus. It wasn't immaculate conception. This is what happened. So it's Zeus. He's super strong. Don't tell him. He'll find out later. But what you need to do is come out and leave this baby alone so that we can attain his like godlike stature, right? She's operating for Athena, kind of operating for Zeus, right? So Hercules has this like godlike strength, whatever. But so Athena leads Hera to Hercules, and Hercules is not named at this point, and she convinces Hera to breastfeed this infant, giving him the godlike immortality, very so similar to the Disney movie, right? The drink, but opposite, right? Giving him his immortality, and as he's doing it, he ends up godlike strengthening, biting her, and she throws him, and has because ultimately she's obviously mad that her husband was doing her husband things And by that, I mean cheating on her. And so she's already mad about that. And then she's trying to forgive this baby. And then the baby's like, you know what, I'm going to bite you. So in a God way. So bites her super hard. She throws the baby and she's like, I'm your enemy forever. And Hercules is like, because he's a baby. So with that, Hera ends up sending 2 serpents to kill the child, and failing to do so because he uses godlike strength to strangle them, right? So he is raised by Amphitryon and Alcmea, and Amphitryon teaches him the ways of being a warrior, of war, of really just like being an awesome father. It's just like, you know what, screw it, I'll be your stepdad, it's cool, you're a demigod, I can forgive that sort of that betrayal upon me or what have you. So to try to appease Hera, they name Hercules Heracles, which is essentially like the champion of Hera, I believe is how it translates. But they give him that name, and he doesn't become Hercules until after he leaves Greece, right? So eventually he obviously, because it's Marvel Comics, he ends up in New York City with the Avengers and things like that. So once he leaves the Olympic situation, once he leaves ancient Greece, that's when he starts being referred to as Hercules. But with this, eventually there is a war, and in this war, his father, or his adopted father, his stepfather, Amphitryon, is stabbed in the back and is killed. And it's at this point that it's revealed to Hercules that he is the son of Zeus, and that he's going to kind of strike out and start making a name for himself as such. And this is where he kind of starts, he takes on the name of Hercules, kind of giving him a division from Hera, but then he starts kind of going into his own as a hero, as it were, to just go the distance, if you would. So that's his origin. That's how we get him deciding to be Hercules, right? Do good for other people kind of guy. So I wanted to talk about the new labors of Hercules because I didn't even know this existed, and then when I started like going back to do my stuff for Hercules, I read about this and I was like, cool. So I hopped into this a lot. So I grew up, I was in Quiz Bowl. I was really big into Greek mythology. I was the mythology kid for Quiz Bowl. That was like one of my roles, and I read about it a lot. So the 12 labors of Hercules is something I was very, very familiar with, and I knew that they were portrayed in the comics. I did not know eventually. So after Thor Ragnarok, right? So Hercules and Thor, I brought it up already. They're like besties, right? Thor might not reflect that as much, but Hercules' best friend more or less is Thor. He has a lot of respect for him. After there's a situation where like Olympus is destroyed, right? And Thor helps lead the reconstruction efforts and things like that. Like they're like this, right? They're besties. And there's a point. So after Ragnarok, I didn't know that Hercules goes into this huge depression, and he finds his solace in the bottom of a bottle, like he and Thor do often, right? Typically, if something awful happens to Thor, that's where he goes. And so with Hercules, he does the same thing. And so and also checkered past, right? Yeah. The thing with, especially with the mythology, you have to keep in comic continuity and mythology continuity. So the 12 labors of Hercules do happen in the comics, but the reason for them are a little argued over, right? So there is a situation where he goes into a berserker rage. He finds that, I think it was Athens was taken over. Wherever he was living at the time was taken over. He goes into a berserker rage, very similar to Wolverine, and he kills everyone, including his wife and children. That leads him to the 12 labors of Hercules. There is also a comic arc where it is simply Zeus coming to Hercules and being like, you need to do these 12 labors to prove that you are worthy of the status of God, right? So in actual Greek mythology, it is him killing his wife and children. In the comics, it's both happen, and it's not really sure which one is the most prevalent, but for the new labors, I would argue it is this killing of his kids because of how the new labors work out. So I just wanted to tell you. So he goes into this drunken stupor, and Hera is like, well, I hate him. Obviously, I set serpents, and it's been thousands of years, and he still sucks. So what I'm going to do I'm going to use Eurystheus, who is a king that's still alive, whatever. And he's like, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get together and we're going to charge, because Hercules needs a bump up, right? So we're gonna make a reality show that's him doing 12 new labors of Hercules to prove that he's still kind of worth it. And then, you know, we can make all sorts of money. He can prove to himself that he is still worthy of his title, and also we can make money on this awesome reality show. So the 12 labors mirrored the previous 12 labors because they're so famous, right? Even in mythology, in comic lore, whatever, they're so famous to the common people of the not of the MCU, of the Marvel 616, that these were set up to follow the same ones, right? So the first new trial is so it's 12 new labors of Hercules. So in place of hunting the Nemean lion for his coat, which is the indestructible coat, whatever, in place of that, he has to steal a saber. Most of what he's doing now is stealing stuff. That's where they went. So he had to steal a saber-toothed tiger from the Savage Lands. So for my friends that play Marvel Snap or just comic book characters in general, he goes and he first mistakes a dinosaur for a saber-tooth, and then the reality TV show people are like, that's not a saber-tooth tiger, bro. And he's like, okay, cool. And he goes back and he ends up stealing Zabu from Khazar. And so he ends up bringing it back, and he completes the first of his tasks. The second task is to mirror him defeating the Hydra, the multi-headed beast, where you cut one head, another one emerges. So he uses his nephew to cauterize the wounds as he cut the heads off so they couldn't grow back. So he is supposed to do the reflection of that, and so that he is charged to solo Hydra, the organization. So he has to topple Hydra, which he achieves because he's Hercules. And after that, in place of, this was so funny to me, in place of capturing the Eutherian boar, they were like, go steal Lockjaw from the Inhumans. So he has to figure out how to get to the moon. And there's a really awesome comic panel where he's standing there and he's just got his arm out and Lockjaw's just bit. He's like bit and locked onto his arm, and he's like, I got the dog, right? So a big joke of these new 12 also is that like 1 through 5 he like breezes through. He doesn't even really have to try, and he's able to get through them. So the back ones get harder, right? So that's number 3. He steals Lockjaw, and he returns all these. He returns everything he takes, right? Because it gets really, really kind of crazy. In place of hunting the golden stag, the Centurion hide, he is set to capture Dragon Man, which is like this synthesized man-made monster thing. So he goes to capture him, and Dragon Man drags him around the universe for a while until he falls asleep, and then he's able to bring him back where he's supposed to be, because he's sleeping. So once again, pretty easy for that. In place of Trial 5, which also, if you look at the original Trials in continuity of Marvel canon, they matched them, but the numbers don't match up with the original 12. It's not actually, the order is unclear of the original 12. The new 12 are very clear, right? So, so in place of number 5, which is his driving out the man-eating birds, he has to drive Atuma, and so my Namor fans in the house, Atuma and his man-eating barbarians, he's got to push them out of Atlantis, right? So he has to go underwater and rid Namor of this aggression, right? Which he does well. After that, they're like, okay, well, how do we do the stables? Because he's supposed to clean for 6, he had to clean these stables, and it took a very long time. And the whole thing was that he diverted a river. But in Marvel continuity, he didn't divert a river. He spent a lot of time just shoveling, and it didn't work out. And then it turns out Gilgamesh, the King of Kings, appeared, and he's the one that diverted the river, and he was mistook as Hercules. So he didn't even complete that task himself in Marvel continuity, which is kind of interesting. But in this situation, what could be an equivalent? They couldn't really figure that out. The modern world is a bit cleaner than the ancient world. So they decided that he would have to just go and survive Red Skull's dust of death. So essentially he went into like Navy training, but without a mask. where they do tear gas trading. He kind of went in there and did that, but with this dust of death that was meant to kill a bunch of people, and he had to just kind of live with that. So at this point, Hera's like, these are all too easy, and we're gonna have to ramp these up because he's just kind of breezing through this. So after that, they're like, okay, in place of and you can actually tell this is kind of quite a big jump up. So one of the 12 laborers, the original 12 laborers, was him fighting the Cretan Bull. So in replace of that, they're like, you can fight Abomination. We'll book Madison Square Garden. We'll make an event out of it, and you need a 1v1 Abomination. Now, once again, I talked about Hulk and Hercules scaling together as far as strength is concerned, and A-Bomb does not scale quite with them, but he is very strong. But so Hercules is able to lay out A-Bomb with a little bit of trial and tribulation. It is a little bit harder. So for the 8th labor, in place of the horses of Diomedes, him having to move the horses of Diomedes, he ends up having to fight Mole Man's Moloids and kill them all, which is super exciting. 9 is stealing Captain America's shield in place of stealing the Amazon's golden girdle. So he has to go and steal Captain America's shield. He's of multiple minds of this because he feels very bad about stealing the pride and joy of the USA. And he's got a lot of respect for Steve Rogers. So he knocks out Steve Rogers and he's like, I swear to God, dude, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this back. And he takes it. Number 10 is the most interesting, in my opinion, the second most interesting of all the new laborers. He has to go steal a Doom bot from Latveria, which incurring the wrath of Doom isn't good even for somebody as strong as Hercules. So this is in place of stealing moving the red cattle of Geryon, Geryon, Geryon. Anyway, to replace stealing the red cattle. After that, and this is what I have posted up on here. He's requested to steal a helicarrier from S.H.I.E.L.D. and he's also assuring them that he's going to bring it back. But he literally chains that sucker up and walks it back to the reality show hosts, which is super crazy. That's number 11, and that's in place of his him stealing the helicarriers in place of stealing Hera's golden apples, which is a whole different thing as far as the Greek mythology goes. And then 12, Hera's like, how do we hit him as hard as possible? 12 is crazy. So for his 12th, so the original 12th, he was supposed to go down to Hades and fetch Cerberus. Cerberus is like a puppy. So he has to go down and he has to fetch Cerberus. In the new 12, they make him go to Hades again, but what he needs to do is get a flower from his dead wife whom he killed. So he goes to Hades, he knocks Cerberus out, nice fun little touching reunion there, and then he sees his family again, his wife and his children, and he gets down on his knees and he begs their forgiveness, and they end up forgiving him, and she gives him a flower, and there's a still of him hugging his family one last time. His family from years and years ago whom he killed, and he didn't mean to, but it happened, and they forgive him, and the last scene of him in Hades is him embracing his family, and it is like, the whole thing is so silly, and then it ends with like, oh my God, like what the hell, and he leaves Hades, and he's like, I'm gonna kick the crap out of the host of this show, Eurystheus. So he's like, he gets out of Hades, his 12 labor is now complete, and he's like, I'm a hero, screw this guy, this shouldn't have happened, and I can't allow this guy to be doing this to other people. So he goes to find him, and they fight for a short period of time, and in the midst of the fight, a shield falls off the wall and decapitates Eurystheus, and ends the situation. And shortly thereafter, the celebration happens. There's a huge party celebrating Hercules' great triumph over these new 12 laborers. And as they look for their man of the hour type situation, he ends up not showing up, and we see him revisiting the graves of his dead family in Greece. And that's how that arc ends. It's crazy because it like builds up in a silly like, oh, here's drunk Hercules, let's make him do stuff, and as you go through them, he slowly evolves into like this he's he comes to term with what reality and mortality is, even though he's immortal. So it turns from silly to pretty cool, pretty interesting, and it was new to me. So I wanted to talk about that. I thought it was super cool, just interesting little parallels. Let me know in the comments what your favorite I'll say it again, but your favorite Hercules moments is. I'm really interested to hear about it. And with that, we will move on to power level. So Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power levels, but here in Frosty Features, we do. Now, the way that this works, if you are a multiversal threat, you can end all of reality, topple them, not just your reality, but all of them all at once, topple the multiverse as a single pillar of destitute rubble. At a universal level, you can end your reality, perhaps hop on over to another reality and end them one by one. Cosmic means that you are strong on a planetary scale. On the small end, destroying planetary bodies with enough time and effort, destroying things like galaxies or solar systems. Nuclear means you have power equivalent to that of a nuclear bomb, leveling things like small cities all the way up to a planetary body with enough time and effort. Super Soldier means you are beyond all human capabilities of strength and otherwise things. So in that, being able to take out things like brick walls or city blocks with enough time. City means that you are strength equivalent to that of the human being that is trained to the absolute and utter peak of ability. Think Olympic athlete level. In the Marvel Universe is where we have a lot of our mercenaries, a lot of our secret agents, etc. And finally, there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that's spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force. And without the Undying team or anyone else to back him up, Greg is weak as heck. So due to undead Asgardian physiology, just because I like to make the argument, Greg is equal to that of a regular human being. So theoretically, if Greg and I both were entered into a chili cook-off and I spent years and years perfecting my perfect chili recipe, and I look across the way, we are positioned against each other. For the chili officials know that Greg and I both make superior chili. I look across and I see him putting in some illegal Asgardian ingredients into his chili, and therefore I take my chili ladle and I hop over the table to give him some of that spicy frostiness, and I beat the ever-loving crap out of Greg. I theoretically could because I am a regular human being. So, in short, Greg is equal to that of the average human being. In the case of Hercules, as I said earlier in the feature, Hercules' feats include being able to punch so hard that it shakes the universe. This would imply that he could be a universal threat. I'm going to argue that he is upper end cosmic. One of the main things that is brought up multiple times throughout Marvel continuity is that he and Thor rival each other in every way. They are very much equals in every instance, right? The only time one can better the other is if the other one is weakened, which happens quite a bit when there is somebody that wins. Usually their fights get called off, that I'm aware of. With that, Thor is higher end cosmic, and because of being able to shake the universe, I absolutely put Hercules right with Thor at higher end cosmic, and I also point out that Thor with the Odin Force is in the universal category. As far as I'm aware, in my limited purview of the comics that I've read plenty of Hercules comics, but there's a lot out there, right? Like with this feature, the new 12 Labors was new to me, right? So with that, there's a lot that can go on, and there probably is a version of Hercules that reaches that universal level, but on baseline Hercules, I'm going to say that he is very, very firmly, very deep, high-end cosmic power. And with that, with all the new things, the mixing up of the relationships and all that none of the other Frosty features kind of had to deal with. One of the other things I want to point out is a new rating, not a new rating, but a different way I'm going to use a rating. With this, I'm going to say that they got it twisted, and here's why. In this, they give us a very basic, generic, Hercules is a hero, and he's honorable, and he's great, right? And they do not dive into the fact that Hercules, like Thor, is a multi-leveled character with a lot of different emotions, a lot of things going on to develop him into who he is, right? And a lot of the modern stuff has helped differentiate between Hercules and Thor because they are so similar, right? So with that, I'm going to say they got it twisted. Usually this is in reference to them mixing MCU with the comic canon, but in this situation, I'm saying that what they said is not wrong, and it's not bad, it's not enough. And so it's like they untwisted a character to make him look a little bit more like sellable or whatever to the next person down the line. So that's where it is. That's Frosty Features Hercules. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Please let me know your favorite Hercules moments in the comments, or if I got anything wrong, I'd love to hear it both ways. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube, where it doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. And as a reminder, I stream at the link above on Twitch Sundays at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, and now YouTube, where we do Frosty Features live. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. Most importantly, y'all, stay cool.